Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
The day my son turned 4 was filled with excitement and a whirlwind of activities. He was at that magical age where every moment was an adventure, and today was no exception. After a morning of birthday celebrations, he approached me with a gleam in his eye. "Dad, can we build something?" he asked, his voice a mixture of hope and determination. "Of course, buddy, what do you have in mind?" I replied, intrigued by his sudden burst of inspiration. "A birdhouse. I want to make a home for the birds," he declared, his enthusiasm infectious. I couldn't have been more thrilled. In a world dominated by screens, his desire to create something tangible was a refreshing change. We quickly gathered our things and headed to the local craft store. As we walked through the aisles, he marveled at the array of tools and materials. "Look at all these colors, Dad. Can we paint it like a rainbow?" he asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "Absolutely. We'll make it the most colorful birdhouse in the neighborhood," I assured him, grabbing a set of paints in every hue imaginable. Back home, we spread the pieces of the birdhouse kit across the kitchen table. My son was eager to get started, his small hands carefully examining each piece. "Okay, Dad, where do we start?" he asked, looking up at me with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. "First, we need to figure out which pieces go where. Then we can start putting it together," I explained, guiding him through the process. He was determined to do as much as possible on his own, and I was more than happy to let him take the lead. As he hammered the nails into place, I couldn't help but smile at his focus and determination. "You're doing great, buddy. Just a few more nails, and we'll be ready to paint," I encouraged him. Finally, it was time for the fun part, the painting. My son dipped his brush into the vibrant colors, splashing them across the wooden surface with abandon. "It's a rainbow house, Dad. The birds are going to love it," he exclaimed, his face beaming with pride. Once the paint had dried, we placed the birdhouse on the table on our back deck. My son stood back, admiring his handiwork with a satisfied grin. "It's perfect, Dad. I can't wait to see the birds move in," he said, his voice filled with anticipation. The next day, I returned home from work to find a letter shoved in my door. It was from the Homeowners Association, and as I tore it open, my heart sank. "What's this about?" my wife asked, noticing the frown on my face. "It's a $50 fine from the HOA. They're saying the birdhouse is an animal sanctuary," I explained, disbelief evident in my voice. "An animal sanctuary? For a birdhouse? That's ridiculous," she exclaimed, shaking her head in frustration. Determined to resolve the issue, I headed down to the property management office, the letter clutched tightly in my hand. The office was a sterile place, all white walls and fluorescent lighting, with a receptionist who greeted me with a practiced smile. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. "I'm here about this fine. It's for a birdhouse my son made. I don't understand how that qualifies as an animal sanctuary," I explained, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Let me get someone to assist you," she replied, picking up the phone and speaking in hushed tones. A few moments later, a stern-looking woman with glasses perched on the edge of her nose approached me. "Hello, I'm Mrs. Thompson, the HOA representative. I understand you have a concern about a fine," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "Yes, it's about this birdhouse. It's just a small project my son and I did together. I don't see how it could possibly be considered an animal sanctuary," I argued, hoping for some understanding. "According to our bylaws, any structure that could attract wildlife falls under that category. It's a matter of maintaining the community standards," she replied, her tone unwavering. "But it's just a birdhouse. Surely there's some room for interpretation here," I pleaded, trying to appeal to her sense of reason. "I'm afraid the rules are quite clear. If you refuse to pay the fine, we will have to take legal action," she stated, her expression one of bureaucratic indifference. Realizing that further argument was futile, I reluctantly agreed to pay the fine. But the real challenge lay in explaining the situation to my son. That evening, as we sat on the deck, I turned to him, trying to find the right words. "Hey, buddy, I need to talk to you about the birdhouse," I began, my heart heavy with the thought of disappointing him. "Is something wrong with it, Dad?" he asked, his brow furrowing with concern. "Well, the people in charge of our neighborhood have some rules, and they think the birdhouse might cause problems," I explained, choosing my words carefully. "But why, it's just for the birds," he said, confusion evident in his voice. "I know, and it's a wonderful birdhouse, but sometimes grown-ups have rules that don't make much sense," I replied, trying to soften the blow. "That's silly, Dad. When we move, let's go somewhere without all these rules," he suggested, his innocent logic bringing a smile to my face. "That's a good idea, buddy. We'll find a place where you can build as many birdhouses as you want," I promised, ruffling his hair affectionately. I quietly sealed the door to the birdhouse and painted the sealed doorway black. I brought it back to the HOA to show them it was no longer a birdhouse, so I would not get fined again. She really didn't like my logic, but there was nothing she could do about it because, in fact, birds could not get in. As the days passed, the birdhouse remained on our deck, a silent testament to my son's creativity and the bizarre world of HOA regulations. It became a conversation piece, a story to share with friends and family who were equally baffled by the fine. "Wait, they fined you for a birdhouse? That's insane," my friend Mark exclaimed when I recounted the tale. Yet I couldn't believe it either. "But what can you do?" I replied, shrugging off the absurdity of it all. In the weeks that followed, my son moved on to other projects, his boundless curiosity leading him to new adventures. But the birdhouse remained, a symbol of his first foray into building something with his own hands. It was a reminder of the joy of creation, the pride of accomplishment, and the sometimes inexplicable nature of adult rules. The experience left me with a newfound appreciation for the innocence of childhood and the importance of nurturing creativity, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. My son's birdhouse may have earned us a fine, but it also taught us valuable lessons about resilience, determination, and the power of imagination. As I gazed at the rainbow house proudly sitting on our deck, a wave of pride washed over me. It was more than just a birdhouse. It embodied my son's spirit and served as a reminder that often the simplest creations can bring the greatest joy. And so, the rainbow birdhouse stood, a beacon of color and hope, a small triumph over the mundane restrictions of adult life. It was a lesson in the importance of standing up for what matters, even when the odds seem stacked against you. And for my son, it was a cherished memory, a story of creativity, love, and the boundless possibilities of a child's imagination. The HOA's decision to fine a family for a child's birdhouse highlights how these organizations can become completely disconnected from the communities they are supposed to serve. Instead of fostering creativity and encouraging children to engage in constructive activities, they choose to nitpick over trivial matters. This fine is not just about the money. It sends a message that individuality and creativity are not welcome. It's a sad day when a simple project made by a 4-year-old can be classified as an animal sanctuary. The HOA should be ashamed of themselves for prioritizing rules over the joy and pride that comes from family bonding and creativity. They need to reevaluate their priorities and remember that community living should be about support and encouragement, not punitive measures that stifle the spirit of the neighborhood. If they continue down this path, they will only alienate residents and create a culture of fear and resentment. Finding a family for a kid's birdhouse? That's just plain pathetic, even for HOAs. It shows how these folks get all high and mighty over nothing. Instead of helping families and letting kids be kids, the HOA is too busy enforcing their dumb rules. Who in their right mind thinks a birdhouse is a problem? This just proves how these organizations create fear and drama in the neighborhood. People need to wake up and see that these rules are just making things worse for everyone. The HOA's actions in this story are beyond ridiculous. Finding a family for a harmless birdhouse? This is how these organizations can lose touch with reality. Instead of fostering a sense of community, they're creating an atmosphere of hostility and resentment. It's baffling to think that a child's innocent project could be seen as a violation of some arbitrary rule. This kind of behavior is why so many people are frustrated with HOAs. They should be promoting creativity and community spirit, not punishing families for wanting to make their homes a little more beautiful. It's time for residents to stand up against this kind of nonsense.
If you like our stories, then please like and subscribe and comment, and remember to hit that bell icon so you never miss out. We have new stories almost every day.
When I bought my first home a few years ago, I was over the moon. I was finally stepping into the dream of homeownership, and to top it off, the townhouse was part of an HOA that seemed like a sweet deal. The fees were reasonable, and the list of things they covered made it feel like I had won some kind of lottery. I didn't have to worry about mowing my lawn. Snow and ice removal were supposed to be handled, and the home insurance was covered. The cherry on top, a pool that came with the package. It all sounded too good to be true, and for a while I basked in the glow of what I thought was a smart decision. But looking back now, I should have known better. It was all just the calm before the storm, and that storm was about to wreck everything I thought I knew about HOAs. The first year was like the honeymoon phase of a relationship. There were a few hiccups, sure, but nothing that really set off alarm bells. But then, like uninvited guests crashing a party, the issues started creeping in. I remember one morning, in the middle of winter, we had a particularly nasty ice storm. I woke up expecting the HOA to have taken care of the sidewalks and driveways, as they had promised. But no, I opened my door to find the ice glistening like a death trap. I almost broke my neck just getting to the mailbox. My neighbor, old Mrs. Henderson, wasn't so lucky. She slipped and ended up with a fractured wrist. When I called the HOA, furious, they brushed me off, saying they only took care of the main roads. The rest of us, we were on our own. I couldn't believe it. We were paying for a service they had no intention of providing unless it was convenient for them. And the pool, the one I was so excited about, well, they conveniently scheduled heavy maintenance for almost the entire summer. The few times it was open, it was packed or I was out of town. It was like some kind of cruel joke. Here I was, paying for all these amenities, and getting nothing but headaches in return. Year 2 is when things really started to go off the rails. Out of nowhere, we got hit with the news that our insurance provider was pulling out of the state. Just like that, we were left hanging. I expected the HOA to have some kind of backup plan, but it was clear they didn't have a clue what they were doing. They scrambled, holding emergency meetings that were more chaotic than productive. It was like watching a bunch of headless chickens run around clucking about coverage and liability but offering no real solutions. And then, because of one claim from years ago that wasn't even our fault, we didn't qualify for decent rates. The next thing I knew, they were taking out a payday loan just to keep us covered, draining the accounts and then, because of course, passing the financial burden onto us homeowners. My monthly fee skyrocketed from $175 to $450 overnight. It was like being sucker punched. One day I was feeling relatively secure. The next I was staring at bills I couldn't afford. I'll never forget the panic I felt when I opened that letter. It was like watching my financial stability go up in flames. But as if that wasn't bad enough, the lawn care, one of the basic services I had counted on, went to hell. After every storm, large branches littered the ground, making it dangerous to walk around or even take my dogs out. You'd think they'd have someone out there cleaning up right away, but no, weeks would pass before anyone bothered to do anything about it. The whole place started to look run down, like we were living in some kind of forgotten backwater instead of a community where people were paying top dollar just to live there. It was infuriating. I felt like we were being taken for a ride, and there was nothing we could do about it. By the time year 3 rolled around, I was already on edge, but things just kept getting worse. My dues climbed to an outrageous $500 a month, and there were whispers that the HOA was going to mandate that we tear out our fireplaces and replace our electrical boxes. And of course, the cost would fall on us. It was like being stuck in a nightmare that just wouldn't end. Every time I thought things couldn't possibly get worse, they did. I remember sitting in one of those ridiculous HOA meetings, feeling the tension in the room as palpable as a storm cloud ready to burst. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh glare on the faces of my neighbors who sat in a resigned silence. Karen, the board president, who seemed to get off on other people's misery, stood at the front, her perfectly manicured nails tapping rhythmically on the podium. She had this air of superiority about her, like a queen addressing her subjects, and it made my skin crawl. As she smugly announced that the rates would be going up again in December, I swear she almost looked pleased with herself, as if she were delivering the punchline to a joke only she found funny. The worst part was the reaction, or lack thereof, from everyone else. No one challenged her. People just sat there, defeated, as if they'd been beaten into submission by a system they felt powerless to change. I could see the weariness etched into their faces, a collective sigh of surrender hanging in the air. It was as if the fight had been drained out of them, one unjust fee at a time. But not me. I felt a fire ignite in my chest, a stubborn defiance that refused to be extinguished. I couldn't just sit by and let them bleed us dry. I refused to let Karen and her cronies dictate the fate of our community without a fight. So I raised my hand, my voice steady but firm, ready to challenge the status quo and stand up for what was right. Since the dues went up, I've watched as a massive number of townhouses in my community have gone up for sale. It's heartbreaking, really. Most of my neighbors are retirees living on fixed incomes and they simply can't afford to stay. The HOA, with its incompetence and greed, has single-handedly priced us out of our own neighborhood. I've seen people break down in tears, packing up the lives they'd built here because they just couldn't take it anymore. And here I am doing the same thing. I've already reached out to a realtor to sell mine. It kills me to think about leaving behind what was supposed to be my sanctuary. But what choice do I have? I can't keep up with the ever-increasing demands, and it's clear that the HOA has no intention of stopping. The HOA, which was supposed to protect and enhance our community, has become a leech, draining us dry with its mismanagement and greed. Every time I see that damn HOA logo, I feel a wave of anger and disgust. They promised us so much, and they've delivered nothing but stress, financial strain, and a community in shambles. What was supposed to be my dream home has turned into a prison, with the HOA tightening the chains every year. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that an HOA can turn even the sweetest deal into a living nightmare. And if anyone ever asks me about buying a home in an HOA, I'll tell them the truth. Run. Run as fast as you can in the other direction, because what looks good on paper can quickly turn into a horror story in reality. Unfortunately, this is becoming a very common story among townhome and condo developments. Insurance costs have skyrocketed, deferred maintenance is finally catching up in poorly funded HOAs, etc. My sister-in-law's condo fee jumped to over $500 a month this year, so she sold and moved back to a single-family home. In California, they outlawed insurance companies from passing on the costs of reinsurance, basically an insurance company's insurance, to customers. So when the cost of reinsurance cost more than they can collect in premiums, the insurance companies stop selling policies. What else are they going to do? California politicians and apologists blame everything except the regulatory environment they created. Climate change is a good scapegoat for just about everything, but it really doesn't make any sense. If it were simply a matter of high costs, they could just raise their rates as high as necessary. Sure, they'd lose customers, but now they're losing 100%. It's the regulations that prevent them from charging as much as it costs. Okay, so genuine comment here. I am not criticizing your position, just want to know more. Aren't you answering your own question by stating that state regulations prohibit insurance companies to increase prices, hence they are pulling out of markets? The reason insurance companies are increasing prices is because of more claims. And more claims are due to more instances of homes being damaged, and more instances of homes getting damaged due to what? I mean, homes don't get damaged without a reason. It doesn't take long to find out that areas which always had moderate climate are now experiencing severe climatic conditions which are only getting worse every year. In addition, the cost of building and materials is increasing steadily. Repairs that costed $7,000 in 2019 are costing at least $12,000 to $15,000 now, probably even more. So if the cost of insuring goes higher and keeps going higher, and the state doesn't allow to increase rates, you can't state that it's just state regulations. I mean, what's the other explanation? If there are no state regulations, sure, the insurance companies can raise rates, but to what point will it be sustainable? Will you be okay paying $15,000 annual premiums for property valued at $500,000? What about $30,000 or $60,000?
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.